What page are you on, please?
So we're on page 61,
Okay.
chapter 21, right?
Prohibition of work
And
on
this
Shabbos.
is the prohibition of work on Shabbos. So we've gone through Rav Hirsch's analysis of a variety of midos of human beings, of love, of hate, of jealousy, of man's place in the universe. And now we find ourselves beginning to analyze man's life, per se, as set out in the Torah. And it begins with the prohibition of work on Shabbos. And so that's where we're going to start today, is the prohibition of work on Shabbos. And he begins with a series of quotes from the Torah, because the prohibition of work on Shabbos, unlike most of the chapter headings we've had before, which were one, maximum two quotes from the Torah, here there are many examples of it. So we will go through them as we proceed.
Wow.
And look at their place in the Chumash and their meaning before we get to Hirsch's analysis of it. So the first one, and many of these are very familiar to all of you, but we'll go through it. Okay, it's called Isser Malacha B'Shabbos. Right, forbidden work is a very mediocre translation of Malacha. Right, of Shabbos. Malacha, as we know, is defined as an activity that was used, that was done in order to create the Mishkan in the desert, and Rav Hirsch will elaborate on this more. But Malacha is really more an act of creativity than it is an act of work. That is to say, in your home, if you wanted to carry a couch upstairs on Shabbos that was needed upstairs on Shabbos, right? It's very possible that if it wasn't muktzah and it was for that purpose, you could do it, even though it would be a very arduous activity. You could do it. It's not a malach. Right? On the other hand, you know, if you walk to your steps and somebody hands you a pencil on Shabbos, that is a capital crime, right? Of work, malacha, right? So we're going to get into a better understanding of why this is and what it is. But for the purpose of this translation, they define malacha as work, right? Isser malacha b'Shabbos, right? Forbidden work on Shabbos. First quote is from Bereshis, chapter 131. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day, and the heaven and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because that in it he rested from all his work which God created in order to complete it. So it seems he created one thing for sure on Shabbos, right? Rest. He created rest, right? Which is something that his children need very badly, because he chose a tribe for workaholics, right? to be his tribe. Leviticus. And you shall observe my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. Next one, from Shmos. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath unto the Lord thy God, and in it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, thy son, thy daughter, nor thy manservant or maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So this is the parsha in which we all ask, what about the Shabbos goy? Right? The stranger among your gates, right? So we're going to talk about that a lot more, but it should be understood that you cannot ask a non-Jew to do work that you would not do on Shabbos. It's absolutely forbidden. There's no argument about that anywhere in the posting. If somebody is doing that, right, then they're violating the law.
The asking of.
specifically asking a person, can a non-Jew work on Shabbos? Absolutely. A non-Jew can work on Shabbos. There's a difference between a contractor and an employee. There are many issues here. We'll come to it in more detail. But very often there is a misunderstanding about the relationship of a non-Jew working for a Jew on Shabbos. And we'll come to it in more detail.
So which is the preferred state? Working or existence in what you created on Shabbos?
The latter.
The latter.
Clearly. All the days of the week are preparation for Shabbos. Right? What is the first day of the week? It's the sixth day from Shabbos, the fifth day from Shabbos. Right?
So it's the existence within your creation. Why would we want to rest from our activity to do another activity within our creativity?
What is the other activity?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, I'm thinking 6 units of work, and the units create something, and then we stop, and we're within our creation. Why would that be a preferred state for Hashem?
As opposed to 1 day of work and 6 days of that activity.
Yes.
Right? So I think that there's a question asked. Each day the manna would fall. The man would fall from heaven. Right? Not the best plan. It might be more efficient to have a month's worth of it fall at once, right? And do it once a month. Rosh Chodesh, all the month falls. It stays fresh. That's not an issue, because God, in the case of the month, right, it's very clear that He wants you to recognize the miracle of the month each day. He wants you to worry a little bit. Is it going to fall tomorrow? Right?
Yeah, you just don't know it, right?
There it is, right? Otherwise, you would only worry once a week, once a month, right? It's the son who goes off to school, and the father writes him a check for, $25,000, right? Here's your allowance for the year. Boom. Thank you, right? The father never hears another word from him for the rest of the year. The next year he says, okay, I'll send you a check, each week. Right? Now the son is in touch with him on a regular basis, telling him how things are going, interesting, because he wants to make sure he gets that check each week, right? The man has that purpose. There's an idea of the separation of it. Why are the majority of the days work days? And I think, we hold that in Messianic times, every day will be Shabbos. Right? That's one of the concepts, is that, the recognition of the wonders of God and the rest of the wonders of God will create an environment in which the world will be at Shabbos. Will be at Shabbos at that point. I think that that Shabbos is a taste of something beyond this world. It's not intended to be of this world. Right?
This is a state initially for God to be in, and then He says it's for us to be in. So something is going on. God created the universe, everything in it, and then He rests. So what does this word rest mean in Hebrew? Is He just a part of it, a conscious part of it, of His creation? His
rest, by the way,
he's not really resting because God is continuously creating.
His rest is not the rest that we associate with rest.
That's right.
Because He's not tired.
He's not tired, right.
I mean, we rest because we're tired. We sleep. One of the reasons, by the way, both us and the Greeks held that man sleeps is to differentiate man from God. Mm-hmm. What do we say in Tehillim? The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Yeah. Right? It doesn't mean he's got insomnia. It means that these things don't apply in God's world. He is 24/7. So what's going on the seventh day? Right?
He's not creating.
Right. On the seventh day,
create. Everything is creation all the time.
Seventh,
it says so in our book. We're constantly creating.
What's happened is in the first 6 days, right?
Man creates.
All those things. No, it's more than that. In the first 6 days, which we're talking about at this point, right? The first 6 days, all those things that have to come into being yesh malan, from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are done. That when you talk to physicists, they will tell you there's nothing new. Shakespeare too. Nothing new under the sun. All that is in this universe, right? It changes form. Matter changes form constantly, nonstop, right? But is there
matter?
Right? Is there a pound more matter today than there was yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
We hold no. It's all this matter changing its form. I shouldn't use pounds because it's the wrong measurement, but we hold this idea that whether man is walking around, or he's fertilizer for a tree. He's buried and he's fertilizer. He becomes fertilizer, right? Whatever, right, of his body, right? It's not less matter. It's just in a different form. Right? All of those things were completed. That creation of matter, the building blocks of the universe, in those first 6 days, right? After that, nothing new came into the universe per se, in a physical form, right? So that's what the completion is about, right? So one of the things, as Charles points out, is there's an element of maintenance. It's not newness, but the reason this table exists, this chair exists, this hat exists, we exist, right, is because on a non-stop basis, God is saying, this is the form that I want. If He decided to take a coffee break, we would all go back to tohu vavohu. Right?
Just like it's not how we got fire with the vinegar. Remember?
Yeah,
because
that's
Rabbi
right.
said God can make oil burn. He can make vinegar burn.
Yeah, this is a point that we'll come to over and over and over. The nature of miracles, really. And by the way, I'll plug for KosherTube.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi Rand gave a great shir on this about a week and a half ago. Rabbi Daniel Rand on miracles and nature.
Oh.
Don't Google it. Search it on KosherTube.
Mm.
The question is, what is the difference between nature and miracles? Right? Is his point. Right? And his point is, it's only our ability to observe. Right? That we observe a miracle to be something that is an anomaly in nature. Right? Normally, the waters stay together.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of a miracle, the waters split. Right? Normally, oil burns and vinegar doesn't. On this day, vinegar burns. It's a miracle. Right? Normally, this amount of oil burns for 1 day, burns for 8 days. It's a miracle. Right? The only thing that defines it as a miracle is our lack of understanding of God's perspective and God's power, which is appropriate because God is infinite and we're finite. But from God's point of view, He didn't have to work harder to make that oil last 8 days. It's not like it was a long day at the office for God. I want this to happen, it happens. Right? It's that simple. He is loath to interfere with an order that He has created, but He will do it. This whole subject of how the universe works is that when Yosef is thrown into the pit that is empty, Rashi says not empty, empty of water, says the Torah, but filled with scorpions and snakes. Right? And Reuben is credited with saving his life for pushing him into this pit. Right? So why? Because the natural order of things is the scorpions and snakes will bite the human being that falls on top of them and kill them. Right? So what's he doing saving their lives? Right? The difference was he was in a situation of great danger from two possibilities. One was from human beings, his brothers, who were determined to kill him. And one was from scorpions and snakes, whose natural order of things is to bite and attack. In the latter, God controls moment to moment everything that an animal does. Right? He sets in place a natural order of things. Scorpions sting, snakes bite. Right? But whether they do or not is not an object of their free will. Right? It's an object of God's system. But God puts into the Bria, into nature, a priority. And it is the essence and the uniqueness of this relationship that free will is a paramount quality in man. And what does free will mean? Free will means the right to make the wrong decision. You know, when your child makes the wrong decision and says, "I'm going out and rolling in the snow naked," you say, "No, I will not permit you to make that decision. You know, you'll come back in the morning, you'll die, and that, you know, be the end of you, right? I will not permit you to do that." God, in the same situation, would permit you to do it. Right? Would permit you to do it, right? Because this is the ultimate decision of free will, is the right to say, heaven forbid someone should say it, God doesn't exist. Right? God could create a world in which nobody could deny his existence. Right? And certainly there's plenty of evidence that we shouldn't deny his existence. Right? But he creates a world in which we can deny his existence. Right? You know, as though a robot could deny the existence of the mechanic who made him. Right? You know, he can do that. Right? You know, it says that a dog knows his owner, right? But man does not. Right? So this whole issue of free will, right, is so paramount that in the case of Yosef, right, had Reuben not pushed him into the pit, it's a very good chance that his brothers would have killed him. Very good chance, right? Because God does not want to interfere with this. It doesn't mean he won't, right? But it's much easier to interfere with the instincts of a scorpion in God's plan than in the desire to do evil on the part of man, good or evil. Choose the path you want to go, you will be assisted in going in that path. That's God's position on it. In the end, you know, Rosh Yeshiva once told me, they said to him, "Why don't you insist that the boys in your yeshiva wear white shirts and hats all the time? Is it important to you?" And he said, "You know, the kavod for Hashem is very important to me. That they present themselves properly when they're davening before God is very important to me. But what is my preference? My preference that I say, you must put on a white shirt. You must wear a hat when you're davening. Or that they will come to this decision out of a kavod for Hashem." Huh? Obviously, the second is of greater merit, if it works, than the first. Right? It may not work, right? But that would be the preference. Is that a young man would say, you know, I shouldn't daven, you know, in a schleppy situation. I'm in front of the king. I should appear in front of the king properly. Right?
So on Shabbos, we take God's role in creating our world because he's resting?
Well, I would describe it more in a maintenance mode than resting. Right?
Automated part.
You know, God is celebrating the completion of creation once a week. Right? And on the first Shabbos, he finished. Right? All creation. All the elements of creation were completed for sure by that day. Right? That was done. Right? So, you know, sometimes professors want to celebrate at the end of grading. Right? You know, and they look back and they say, you know, I remember, you know, the end of the Christmas break, the December break, you know, when I would finish grading. It was such a relief, you know. Even though I have nothing to grade this year, I think I'll raise a little glass and say l'chaim to all the other professors who are finishing now another year of grading. So God, every Shabbos can celebrate that, for sure. Our relationship is that we do need rest in the formal sense of the word. We do need the Shabbos. We do need the time. By the way, interestingly enough, you know, one of the differences between malacha and work is that, I don't know in your houses, but I have to say that my observation is that my wife works pretty hard on Shabbos. She doesn't do any malachas, heaven forbid, but she seems to work pretty hard on Shabbos. But I think that it's the whole purpose of it really is to separate. You know,
I was thinking about that.
You know, it's Havdalah. Right?
It's a separation.
Yeah.
For holiness.
Yeah.
But we also separate, and in a sense, on Shabbos, we join God in a rest too.
Have you ever read Kegavna?
No.
If you have a chance, we read B'Maduvkim between Kabbalah, Shabbos, and Maariv, which is a Mishnah on what wicks you can use on Shabbos. And to a very large degree, the purpose of this reading is people coming late to shul won't miss, Maariv, right? So there's and you need a space between Kabbalah, Shabbos, Maariv, so that's what we do. The Nusach Ari reads something very, very different. And if I had a copy of Nusach Ari, I don't have it here.
Tell me about
I would show it to you.
Tell me about
But it talks a great deal about the idea of, when we sing Shalom Aleichem, right? There's an idea that two angels accompany you home from shul, on Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't they accompany me home every week? Every day. Why just on Shabbos, right? Because Friday night is a very dangerous time, and you need protection, right? It's a time in which the the idea of tectonic plates that grind and move, right? It's a time when the universe, spiritually, is going through this tremendous structural change, right? It's very dramatic, and it's a dangerous time. We believe it to be a very dangerous time. Things are moving. And it is a time when the Shekhinah, and I'm getting on fairly dicey ground here. This is a Zohar, right? And I am not a Kabbalist, right? But it is part of the Nusach Ari davening, and it describes the unity of the Shekhinah with the Ein Sof, with Hashem, right?
the lights, the emanations.
Which implies that somehow there's a disunity between them at other times, which is, I don't want to get into the details of this, right? But the Shekhinah represents God's presence in our world in a kind of recognizable way.
Tangible way.
Yeah. So on this time, which is described as the Maariv of Shabbos, right? That she, the Shekhinah, with crowns on her head, right, is united in. It's an intimate description with the one above. With
we refer to it as a Shabbos queen, right? The bride.
This is different. This is different. This is a woman of valor.
It's a separation that leads to holiness.
But and a unity that leads to holiness. And so one could see it as our representative, here in the finite world, right? Not that the Shekhinah is finite, heaven forbid, but that in a sense that, the everybody has an ambassador. Heads of state have ambassadors, right? The ambassador now returns to the home office to make the case of the nation that ambassador is the ambassador to on Friday night, right? And has an intimate conversation with the president about the merits of our relationship with Canada. I'm working with this as I go. But when you read it, it's a tremendously emotive piece. It's a Zohar, right? It's not a lightweight thing. I feel bad that I don't have it. But read it if you can. It's in any Chabad Shabbos Siddur. You'll see it. And it talks about the intimacy and that evil is banished from the world at this moment of unity, and it's very dramatic, right? And the word, if you're ever in a shul, not, by the way, interesting, it's not part of Sephardi, and it's not part of Ashkenaz, just Sephardi, right? And they will emphasize the word rezat, as they're saying it very often, which means secret. There's a lot of secrets of this Friday night, of this unity of the Shekhinah with the Ein Sof. So there is some kind of bridging going on Friday night between.
It's a movement through Zimtzum into the unity. There's a contraction.
Well, Tzimtzum is how the universe got created. God had to do Tzimtzum to make the universe.
No, but
that's in the Tanya.
But on Shabbos, it's going in reverse, because you're going through the details into the infinite. It's different. It's just the opposite.
Well, God had to contract himself, or else he wouldn't be able to create the universe. He had to do Tzimtzum to make the universe, to make us.
I'm talking about on Shabbos, you're going in the opposite direction. You're resting and you're making contact with Hashem. You're going beyond that.
And we're into an area that I am certainly not qualified to lead in. But that it's worth reading the Zohar. There aren't, for Jews from Europe, the Zohar plays a very small role in our prayers, in our davening. It appears in a few places. This is, to me, by far the most dramatic one, right? Ana B'Koach is also, mystical prayer as well. There's a few places where there are mystical prayers, and there are in the Ashkenaz Siddur. But this one, which is Sfard, is worth reading. It raises, for many people, many questions, which takes a lot of learning to appreciate. Is there a duality in here that we should be concerned about? It's worth examining. But let me go on a little bit further, because we didn't even make it off the first page yet.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Third one, 6 days thou shalt labor.
6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but on the seventh day is the Sabbath unto the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that the manservant and the maidservant may rest as well as thou. Emphasis on that. And thou shalt remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day, connecting the Sabbath to something
that was in Deuteronomy.
That was extremely familiar to the people. Right? They weren't part of creation, but they certainly were part of the people listening to this, were the children of those that came out of Egypt, and identifying Shabbos with the Exodus. And verily you shall keep my Sabbaths, for it is a sign, an ois, a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you will know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. We say there are 3 signs that specifically that have this quality, right? Shabbos, right? Bris Milah, right? Tefillin, right? That these are osios, that these are signs, right? And they are very important in terms of qualifying a person as a Jew, right? His position in a court, his position to give evidence, his role in different activities as a Jew. These are all very, very important, elements. A head that has not worn tefillin in its entire life of a Jew, right? There's many issues for that person in the world to come. It's a concern, right? Especially if they have the opportunity to. If they didn't have the opportunity, then it's something very bitterly missed. You're not blamed for it, but you don't have the benefit of it.
It's interesting. I remember the first time I put on tefillin. I can't describe it. It was like such a connection. It was like a rush.
Well, it's an energizer.
It was more.
That's what I think. It's a good battery.
It's almost like a Shabbos. The same experience.
Yeah. They are mystical, as is the Bris Milah. Not the act of having it. I'm having had it happen when you're 8 days old. But its role in our world. The other place that Milah is described is your heart. Right? That you have to circumcise your heart. Is to reveal, to take the separation away. Right. That's what we're talking about.
Like the Shema says, you should love God with all your heart and all your soul.
Right. With no separation. You shall keep the Sabbath day, therefore, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work therein, the soul shall be cut off from his people. Karis. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth. On the 7th day he ceased from work and he rested. So here is a very harsh statement. Right? You know,
Exodus.
if you work on Shabbos, as defined as malacha by the Torah, which is a whole thing that we have yet to get into, right? But if you do that with the intent of knowingly violating Shabbos, right, then you've written your own sentence at that point. You said, I don't believe God exists, and he's not part of my world. Right? How that sentence will play out is between you and God. When God says death will come into the world, it doesn't mean Adam dies on the spot. You know, he lives a very long time after it.
But he does die.
He does die, and God waits till the last moment for tshuva.
Tshuva,
right? You know, in the process.
Because he brought death into the world, not death, actual death. But he made death happen. Brought death into the world.
See, my question is that
forever.
Is it come at is 6 days, 6 units of time, 6 units of creation, and then there's a separation, and there's an experience of this holiness, of spirituality, of connection. Is the death that one would have in continuing to create in this time period, or is it or is the death coming about because the person is creating when they should be doing some other activity? There seems to be a contradiction that leads to death if one creates when one should be at rest and connected. You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, look, I think that, you know, death here, right? This is David Ostriker talking. This is not another source, right? But it seems to me clear that death here means ceasing a physical life, right? More than that, it says you'll be cut off from your people, which is a reference to after death as well.
Well,
that you're separated from your people, right? I think that, you know, there is an idea that the Rasha is dead while he breathes, and the Tzaddik is alive after he passes on. Yaakov lo mes. Yaakov didn't die, right? And I think we understand those things quite well. You know, we know what the influence of a tzaddik is, you know, after he passes on. We see it in our world. You know, we see the influence of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov today in our world. They're still alive. They're still actively changing the way the world is perceived, Baruch Hashem, right? It doesn't mean that, you know, Yaakov's going to come in here and get Hagba. It's not going to happen, right? We're not talking about that. But we're talking is, does Yaakov, you know, we're sitting here talking about Yaakov, right? If we're just sitting here chatting about Yaakov and we get up and say, well, that was an interesting historical character, then I certainly have failed in my job. You know, the reason to talk about Yaakov is to learn the lessons that Yaakov has for us, Torah, his lessons that Yaakov has for us in terms of living our lives. So it's no question what it means for a tzaddik to be alive after his days after he's gone to sleep with his fathers. Dead Man Walking is the name of a famous film, right? You know, we know the idea of a deadening. You know, I mean, you know, one of the issues with some of the terrible things that we see in our world of random shootings and murder, is a person who is alive in the true sense of the word can't do that. Can't do that. Right? It's a person who is already deadened to everything godly. You know, whether it's through sickness or pain or suffering. This is not for me to judge. But, you know, a person who can kill innocent people.
That fellow in Rochester.
Without any kind of sense that this is, you know, humanity you're dealing with. And no relationship, no anger to the person. Right? Is a dead man walking. Is a person without a connect. You know, I was saying to a person who was going to New York for NCSY. They were going on an NCSY trip for Yarkey Con, right? And he had just gotten a shiny passport, teenager. Right? And I said, "Look in your passport. It's your passport, right?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look in your passport." He said, "Why?" I said, "It's not your passport. It's a passport that's owned by the Canadian government that they give to you to use for identification purposes, right? And if for some reason they want it back, you give it back. It's not yours, right? You know, if something's yours, you don't have to give it back. It's yours. Right? Passport, you give back. Right? Most of that. So it is with us and God, right? You know, we are here. This body that we have, this, you know, the Nefesh will say is Heilakot part of God. Certainly the body that we have is a gift that has a purpose, right? And at a moment, you know, God can say, "Okay, I'm taking it back. You know, its function is completed. I'm taking it back." Right? But you have no right to make that decision, right? And only somebody, not who's even playing God, only someone who is dead to everything that, you know, is in the Bria, in the creation, can do this kind of thing, you know. And whether that deadness comes from, right? So, does that mean that everybody who doesn't keep Shabbos is going to go and start shooting people randomly? No, it doesn't mean that, right? But I think there is an element of the description of deadening that goes on. Shabbos is a livening process.
Livening. It's
you know,
the opposite. That's right.
It's something that creates a greater sensitivity to the Bria. I mean, you would think the more intensely you are involved with it, the greater your sensitivity. It's actually completely the opposite. Taking this one day to separate from the Bria, to be at another level, to be untouched by the pressures of the time, actually gives you a perspective and a sensitivity to the other 6 days. So you cannot get any other way.
So when God rested from his world that he created, is he really becoming conscious of himself in another way?
No. No, because I think that it's two separate things. I think, first of all, I think God grants Shabbos to himself for us. Specifically. And by the way, when I say for us, I mean actually in a narrow sense for the Jewish people. Shabbos is a Jewish thing. It's it's a uniquely Jewish thing. Do other people take Saturday off? Yeah, they take Saturday off. They take Sunday off. Some take Friday off. You know, 7-day week seems to be quite universal, right? All the experiments with other things, 7 days seems to stick, right? And very often people take one, sometimes 2 days off, right? But the idea of its significance in terms of this, right? I think God didn't need the day of rest. God didn't need the celebration of it, and all of that. I think this was stating because God is you know, in the world of filmmaking, you never describe a script as complicated. Never. If you're a writer, you never come into this is elegant, it's so complicated how these, you never do it, right? So this is a complex plot. It's complex. This is a good word to use. Complicated is a bad word to use. God is Tom, right? God is simple, right? I would argue God is complex, but not complicated, right? So I don't think that, you know, we anthropomorphize God to imply that he needs Shabbos, right? Shabbos is a gift to us.
That's for us. We don't
I think Shabbos is a gift to us. And it creates something that we've talked about before, and I have a sense we will talk about many times over, is that the sense of discrete, of separation, of discernment, right, is something that God requires of Jews and of all mankind, on one level or another. Never in a sense of a hostile, but in a sense of, it's a very interesting word, because discriminating at one time was a very positive trait. A person of discriminating tastes. Renaissance men.
Mm-hmm.
Person of discriminating tastes.
Today we use another term. We use differentiation. A psychologist did.
It's interesting. It's interesting because discriminating today, because of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, has meant separating and discriminating negatively one race against another, right? But when God wants us to be discriminating, we should discriminate between the 6 days, mundane days of work, and the holy day of Shabbos, right? We have Havdalah that recognizes that at the end of the process, right? We have, different ways of Kabbalah Shabbos, of recognizing the coming in to it, right? And this is a theme constantly within Yiddishkeit, of recognition through separation, I think. And, it's central. Shabbos is the penultimate example of it, I think, in the Jewish world. And that's why it is an ice, right?
Would you say that creation for Hashem is a separation, but without that separation, you cannot have holiness? Joining.
The thing about it is that without Shabbos, there would exist a separation between us and God. Right? Shabbos is, I think, a metaphor for us to understand the whole concept of separation. I think it's and all the positive things that are part of it. I think inherently that we don't like it. Inherently, we like to continue doing what we did yesterday. We're creatures of habit. So, if yesterday I went to the gym, and yesterday, I ate 3 meals this way, and yesterday, I drove to here to do that, right? I can't take it anymore, so I get a 2-week holiday, right? But my 2-week holiday is also, a part of routine, right? It isn't a concept of saying, let's make it different. It's time for a holiday. Right? I think that there's a tremendous emphasis in Shabbos, is that it must be different. Because what do we say about Shabbos? It's a taste of the world to come. Right? The world to come isn't here. Right? It's a taste of something otherworldly. It doesn't really relate very well to our world. Right? And that's the intention of it, is to step back. Jews are notoriously famous comedians and have been forever. Right? Why is it? Right? It's because we're an awful lot like everybody else in the room. But there's something that's a little bit different. We're a little bit of an outsider. Right? And it doesn't matter how assimilated you are. You know deep inside, and everybody else knows deep inside, who you are.
You're Ivrit.
Right. And
you're on the other side of the river.
And when you're on the other side of the water, when you're Ivrit, when you're of Avraham, it means that even though you look, like McNeil and Lyra and whoever, right? Well, I shouldn't pick them because one of them might be Jewish, right? Mm-hmm. But even though you look like everybody else in the room who's not Jewish, right? You're not. Which means that you see things slightly differently. Years ago, I made one of the first films. It was a short with Danny Aykroyd. Right? Everyone knows who Dan Aykroyd is, right? We were on Young Street, south of Bloor. There used to be some Army Navy stores there. The director lived there.
Oh, right? I remember that, yeah.
And Hercules, I think, was in a store that was there, right? And we were going from one location to another. It was a very low-budget film, right? The word blind was in it. It'll come back to me. I was the cameraman on the film. And I remember walking with Danny down Young Street from where Hercules was towards, I guess it was Wellesley. And it was one of the funniest walks I'd ever had in my life. And if I had taken the same walk by myself, it would have been comfortable, but there would have been nothing funny about it at all. Right? It was his powers of observation. He saw things I didn't see. Saw things I didn't see. Because in his world, by the way, he's not Jewish, right? But in his world, part of the world of the comic is to see everything that you see differently. Right? Not to see something that's different, but to see what you see differently. Right? It's in your vision. This is actually why Jews are such great comics, is because they do see everything slightly differently than the population in which they live, because they are different. They're different than the neshama through both nurture and nature. So it is with Shabbos, right? Is that in order to have a sense of the world to come, God gives us Shabbos. I don't think God gives us Shabbos because he needs to rest. He needs a different consciousness. I don't believe that his consciousness changes an iota on Shabbos. I think that it's a metaphor for our separation, our observation, our awareness. That's what it's about. I think there are many elements in God's universe that are spiritual, that do change on Shabbos. But the essence of God on Shabbos, I don't think that changes. I don't think it ever changes.
I'm not talking about so much essence, but more activities. Doing Shabbos is a different set of activities, and almost implies halacha with it. Because in order to do Shabbos, or to do 6 days of a work week, you have to follow different halachas.
We're going to come to this in detail. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, all we're talking about is the setup, right? Hirsch is saying this is why, right? And this is how critical it is to God that you do this, right? And if you're going to keep Shabbos by saying I'm going to do things differently, you're going to fall on your face. So you need the halachas, and the more understanding you have of how to keep Shabbos, the more you will be able to fulfill the will of God for that day. There's no question about it. And the closer it becomes as a piece of the world to come. Okay, let's just at least try and get through the quotes.
That's it. Yeah.
6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day there shall be there shall be to you a holy day, a Sabbath of solemn rest to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work therein shall be put to death. Ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations on the Sabbath day. Right. This is the law that separates the Sadducees from the Pharisees. Right. That the reason we eat cholent is because of this. Right. Each week is that
they would do fire.
The Sadducees held that ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon Sabbath day. Meant that there was no fire in your house. You sat in the cold and the dark and ate cold food.
Yeah.
Right. We hold no. Oneg Shabbos is there, and our understanding, and this comes from the rabbinic tradition, that you don't light a fire, not that you don't have a fire. Right. You don't increase a fire. Right. Not that you don't have a fire. Right. You don't cook something, but something that's cooked you have warm. Right. And so it goes.
Like cholent.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Makes perfect sense, because God created the world in 6 days, and the world didn't go away; it continued operating.
It's so interesting that you raise this, because what is Havdalah? Havdalah is supposed to be Adam Rishon's celebration, right? That he lived in terrible fear that first Shabbos, right? That there would be no sunlight after it. It was his first day. Right. He hadn't had 7 days.
Yeah, not 7 days.
When the sun went down on Shabbos, and he had already committed his sin, right, at that point, he thought, this is what it means for death to come into the world. We're beginning nuclear winter. Right? It's over. Right?
That's a very good point.
The sun is gone.
Yeah, he hasn't seen millions of days.
It's not coming back.
Had the first day.
It's not coming back.
Yeah.
Right? That Friday night. It's not coming back. Right? We're finished. Right? I caused this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
This was what he thought. And by the way, this plays into the story of Hanukkah too, because in the first year, as the days got shorter and shorter, he thought he was responsible for this as well. Right? And that finally it would be over. Right? On the 9th of Teves, the days got longer. Right? On the 25th of Kislev, the days began to get longer in his world. And he understood this was a very good thing, right? Which is also the first day of Hanukkah, right? Which is also for pagans an important day for slightly different reasons, but related. Speak to the children of Israel and say unto them, the appointed seasons of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my appointed seasons. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of work. It is a Sabbath unto the Lord in all your dwellings. So here God links the Yom Tovs with Shabbos, right? But only in one sense, right? He's saying, yes, you have the Yom Tovs, and yes, they are convocation. So anything that is within the quality of the Yom Tovs, right, is also within Shabbos. But not the vice versa. Not everything that's within Shabbos is in Yom Tov. There's big differences between the two. We determine when the Yom Tovs are. God determines the seasons. We determine Rosh Chodesh. God gave that as a mitzvah, right? If you determine when is Rosh Chodesh, you determine when Hanukkah falls, when Pesach falls.
Isn't it all lunar based?
What?
The laws of when holidays occur, they're based on the movements of the moon.
They're based on witnesses to the movement of the moon. Right?
Witnesses.
Yeah. So it's why we don't always know. I mean, today we do, right? It'll change again when the temple's rebuilt. But today we're going on a 19-year calendar that is a forever calendar, right?
We just passed one of the 19-year points, right? Just recently.
Well, it revolves every 19 years, right?
Yeah,
That's right. 19 years the sun is in the same place it was
yeah.
at the first day of creation on Tuesday, I think 22nd of April.
Yeah.
I often thought about this. Maybe this is off topic.
Let me hold it, because we're almost done.
Yeah.
We're almost done, and then we can open the floor to it. 6 days shall thou work, but on the 7th day is a day of rest. In plowing time and in harvest you should rest. Right? Nothing should interfere with the rest. You think you've got to bring in the hay?
You
Don't. Give it that one day. I'll take care of it. Recently, I was told about a wedding or not a wedding, a simcha, where there was a couple that had a get, and the child was being bar mitzvah.
Had a get? Oh, yeah, divorce.
Divorce, right? Child was being bar mitzvah, and a lot of tension between the parents. And there were two events. The mother did one event, the father did one event. And the friends of the father and the son were at one event, and the friends of the mother and the son were at another event, and then and there was some overlap. Right? And at one point, and there was a lot of anguish that had led to the get. There's a lot of very bad blood that had led to the get. So much so that the mother really would have preferred that the father didn't come to her event. But since he is the father, right, so okay, fine, but not his whole posse come along with him, right? So he brought his whole posse, right? And she said, I don't want them all coming in here. And the Rav stepped forward and said, no, that's not how it is in my shul. Shabbos, the doors are open, everybody comes, everybody observes it's a house of God, and will behave accordingly, right? Shabbos, right? And even though he was the Rav of the mother, it felt like a kind of reprimand. Right? But it was not a reprimand at all. It was the Rav doing what a Rav always should do. He was stepping forward and saying two things at once. Right? This is halacha, this is proper, and don't worry, I'm here. This is not going to become a problem. I'm here. I'm in charge. You can rest. Right? That's what he was saying.
And don't miss the mark.
That's what he's saying. He's saying, you don't need to do this, because the things you're worried about, they're not going to happen. I'm here.
Right.
This is a metaphor for understanding, when it says, even at plowing time, even at harvest time, right? I'm here, right? Later on I'm going to tell you to take a whole year off, not just a day. And then I'm going to tell you to take 2 years off. Yovel and Shemitah. Right? Don't worry, I'm here. It's going to be fine, right? You'll see, right?
So in Shabbos we get close to God. He rests to communicate with us that we should get close to God.
For sure. Sure.
I see what you're trying to say.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it is a unique time of this. It's a unique time of this.
It's spirituality.
We're not saying, by the way, no one should ever confuse that, God is somewhere else during the 6 days, or that, in a different place than we're in, right? None of that's true, right? But the issue of God's revelation, our awareness of God, changes at different times in different places. I don't think, it's hard to find people, even those who are not religious, who don't sense something unique when they're at the Koisel, when they're at the wall, right? People feel something, right? Why? It's a wall. It's a piece of stone. It's stone. Okay, it's a very impressive structure, right? In fact, it's a tragic place. We all celebrate it, but it's a tragic place. It's not even the temple. It's a wall around the mountain of the temple, but it's the closest thing we got, so we connect it. Right? There's a very famous story of Jimmy Carter and Menachem Begin, right? And he said, Mr. President, yeah, Jimmy Carter was not the biggest fan of the Jews in Israel.
Definitely proved that now.
And he said, Mr. President,
from Georgia.
You're here at the Western Wall, retaining wall of the temple. Do you have anything that you want to communicate to God? This is the place to do it. Right? Here it's a local call. It's a local. And he said, I wish that God would bless the world, that there should be no hunger and disease. It's just beautiful, Mr. President. Beautiful. At this holy moment, is there anything else? Is there anything else? The idea that swords should be, pounded into plowshares. The time has come. God should bring it about now. Oh. Mr. President, it's a beautiful, beautiful. I'm sure God hears everything you say as you stand by the Western Wall. It's holy. Is there anything else? Like one more. This land should be divided into 2 lands. One for your cousins and one for you. Mr. President, now you're talking to the wall. That's not happening.
That's not happening.
That's not going to happen.
Good.
Anyway.
All right.
So this is the setup for Shabbos, right? That's all we've read. We haven't read. Now we're going to begin pages and pages of
Shabbos,
why it is, and then in more detail, you're going to love it, of the malachas of Shabbos, and why the malachas of Shabbos. And we're going to end up learning a lot about simply the malachas of Shabbos, how to conduct Shabbos. because part of this book is for people to improve their Yiddishkeit,
Mm-hmm.
and to give them reasons.